You are now listening to a podcast made in collaboration with the Copenhagen College Radio.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 43 of the Social Media and Politics podcast, bringing you expert insights into how social media is changing the political game. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, political scientist at the University of Copenhagen. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at SMNP Podcast, and also check out the Facebook page, facebook.com/Social Media and Politics Podcast. Boy, oh boy, what a week in the space of social media and politics, huh? Cambridge Analytica in the crosshairs and getting nixed, pardon the pun, by Facebook. And I want to direct you guys, if you haven't heard it already, to episode 24 of this podcast, where we talk with Cambridge Analytica's head of product and discuss how they were using social media to help the Trump campaign. So that can give you a little inside perspective as to what was going on before all of these bombshells dropped. In other news, our guest from last week, Hanneke Brunsma, was successful in getting a seat on the local council. So congratulations to her. And what we were talking about in that episode was how WhatsApp was used as a campaigning tool in local Dutch elections. And in this episode, we're going to be kind of sticking on the app train and looking at how mobile apps are used for canvassing and organizing in the context of elections and advocacy. So I'm going to be interviewing Thomas Peters. He is the founder and CEO of UCampaign, which is a company that has developed a mobile app that has been used by a variety of campaigns and advocacy organizations in the US primarily, but also outside. And what the app does is you download it to your phone, and then you can take a number of actions. You can share your contact list with the campaign. You can promote their messages on social media. You can send text messages to your friends. And for each action you take, you earn points in a gamification system that allows you to advance getting different badges as you go along. So this app is really, I think, successful because particularly it's on a mobile device, and then the campaign can send push notifications to your phone, which are just way more likely to be opened than sending, a Facebook message or an email. And what the app also has is its own newsfeed for the campaign to reach supporters. And it also has spaces for supporters to interact among themselves. So it's kind of a self-sustained social network around the campaign within a mobile app, which I think is quite cool. And, what it does is it limits a lot of that polarizing discussion between opposite sides. So this is kind of a safe space for supporters to discuss, how to further their interests within this mobile app. So I think that's cool. I think this is something that campaigns are paying close attention to. I think this is kind of where campaigning is going in terms of having more one-to-one messages to people's phone, as we've seen with WhatsApp last week, but also with this app this week. And where this app really had its breakout was with the Ted Cruz campaign back in 2016 when they won the Iowa caucuses. And since then, it's been used by the Trump-Pence campaign. It's been used by the Leave side of Brexit, the UK Conservative Party, and currently it's being used by the NRA to promote its interest amidst growing controversy around gun control. So what you'll notice is that all of these campaigns have a right-wing bend to them, and that's not by coincidence. UCampaign describes itself as a center-right company. And in this interview, we're going to talk about what the app is, kind of what the features are that it does, and the design choices put behind them. We're going to talk about how the app has been used, not just in the US, but also in the Dominican Republic, for example, and those kind of cross-cultural differences in terms of app design. And of course, we're going to talk about how social media is integrated into the app to promote calls to action and message amplification. So without further ado, let me bring on Thomas Peters. He is the founder and CEO of UCampaign. Thomas, thanks so much for taking the time out. Welcome to the Social Media and Politics podcast.
Absolutely, Michael. My pleasure to be here.
So can you start out by giving us an introduction to UCampaign? What does the company do, and what were the motivations behind forming it?
So for about 10 years, ever since my young 20s, I've been interested in social activism and especially like digital online grassroots. And I did that sort of on a consultant basis, and I worked for a couple companies over the course of those years. And I enjoyed the work, but I also found it frustrating because I didn't believe we had the right tools to offer the people we were trying to get motivated to do things. And this kind of culminated for me on election night in 2012, when I had been trying to help the Mitt Romney presidential campaign win from the outside. And that evening, we knew very quickly that he had lost and that Barack Obama had won beaten us again. And I remember very distinctly, I was sort of, at this party, which had turned into sort of a wake of disappointed Mitt Romney supporters. And I was on my phone and I was texting back and forth with friends saying, oh no, the sky is falling. And I realized that I was using my smartphone to complain about losing, but we didn't have a way to use smartphones to organize and win. And so that's where the idea of creating a smartphone app and then just asking your volunteers and supporters to download it came from. And then the second part of the idea was because personally, I spent a lot of my youth playing computer games. I knew how powerful gamification and points and badges and awards and leaderboards and all these sort of things were. And so we incorporated that into the first prototype of our app. And since then, we've built 50 of them. So it's been very successful.
Yeah, and I'm super interested in the gamification aspect. But first, I want to ask you about the kind of mobile app specificity. Like, why focus on smartphone apps as a tool for organizing an action? What do they kind of bring to the table?
Well, it's about the attention economy. 90% of time spent on smartphones is spent on apps. And so what I tell organizations is that if you don't offer your top supporters a smartphone app, you're competing for their attention in that last 10% on the mobile web, or you're paying organizations like Facebook and Twitter, and they capture all the data and don't really share it with you. So if you have people who are motivated enough to download a smartphone app, it's a very good proposition for you.
And can you walk us through the kind of user experience with the app? So I've kind of looked at a couple different campaigns that are using the app right now, and it's really put, front and center on their website or on the cover photo of their Facebook page, download the app on iOS or Android. If I was to go and do that, can you walk me through the steps of what that experience would be like?
Sure. The onboarding process is always a balance between keeping it simple, but also capturing enough real data to start creating value for the client. So if you open up one of our apps, the first thing we ask you to do is log in either socially via Facebook or via a verified email or phone number. And so whichever way you choose to join the app and create a profile, we have some hard piece of data on you that helps us identify who you are. And then from there, we ask people to fill out a profile. And what we found is, organizations will spend all this money trying to get third-party groups to find information about their supporters, when literally, if you just ask them, they'll fill it out for you. So they'll say, here's where I live, here's the issues I care about, here's my demographics, here's my age, am I registered to vote, etc. And then once you've filled out that personal profile, the first thing we show you is our news feed. The news feed is the most popular screen in our apps. And much like Facebook or Instagram, it's simply a timeline of content from the organization. So we can bring in content that they're creating uniquely, or content like podcasts, YouTube channels, Facebook, whatever content the client is creating. But crucially, the other source of content is posts from other supporters of the organization. So you quickly realize that this is sort of a safe space, your own Facebook group, but it's an entire app just for people who care about the same things as you.
So kind of like a social media within the app itself.
Yeah, basically your private social network for whatever cause it may be.
That's cool. And one thing I wanted to ask you about is kind of relating to that smartphone app aspect of it, which is it also links up to your contacts, right? So people can send personalized text messages or, text messages facilitated by the campaign to their actual contacts in their phone.
That's right. Only a smartphone has access to those contacts. In the US, most people, the average is 246 phones and emails that you have stored there. And we think a lot about social networks in terms of the big ones like Facebook and Twitter. But the reality is that each of us has a real personal social network. And that's the fabric of our real life family and friends. And those people we tend to interact with via our phone address book by actually just texting them directly, by emailing back and forth. And that's the network that we try to activate and bring into the cause that we're supporting.
Right. And from my field in academia, we know that, for example, personalized messages are effective, whether it's through Facebook, whether it's through WhatsApp. And I can only imagine that an actual text message is even higher in terms of a conversion rate, getting someone to do something, because it's coming from someone that you know and that you trust. And your app kind of facilitates that.
That's right. Yep.
Cool. Now, one thing I noticed looking at different screenshots from different campaigns that are using the app is that they kind of have a similar template, but then they can kind of customize it with different features, I guess, based on their own interests or how they want to run their campaign. Can you talk about that in terms of how some campaigns, like the template is the same, but the features are different?
Yes. So what users see when they download the app is one thing. The other whole side of the company is basically this platform that allows the client to customize and launch their own app. And that's really the cool technological feature of it. So when we onboard a new client, let's say that the National Rifle Association or Generation Atomic, we just give them login access to our website that we built, and then from there they can make choices and changes to what they want their app to look like, what sort of actions and features they want to enable or disable. And then all those changes are reflected automatically in the app. And so at this point, whenever we build a new tool for one client, we make it available to the entire platform. And so at this point, the platform is the best ideas of 50 clients that have come through before it.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of iterates and adding new features as the different campaigns take it on.
Yeah, in technology, this is sort of the new fad. It's called microservices. And so you sign into the UCampaign platform, and then you can add on more microservices. Like, so for instance, not all clients want to have lobbying features. They're not in the business of lobbying representatives, or not all clients want to have canvassing door to door. So it allows them to pick and choose which features they want to enable. And that way everyone kind of gets the perfect fit for them. But because it's a template, they're also saving a huge amount of money, because if someone were to try to just create an app from scratch, you really can't create a good iOS, Android app for less than a few $100,000. And it takes about 6 or 9 months. And then at the end of that, it might not even work, up to your expectations. And so for most campaigns, especially sort of snap elections or in more of a parliamentary system like in Europe, where campaigns may last only 6 or 8 weeks, you have to have something off the shelf that can start running very quickly. We built our Brexit app in 5 days, for instance.
Right, because you're basically taking the previous design and then just kind of customizing it
basically
to the Brexit campaign. Interesting. But one of the kind of key features that all the campaigns seem to use on the app is that gamification system, and specifically the incentive for users to take action in order to earn action points, which allow them to unlock different badges, which I think is super neat. It's kind of like leveling up. Can you go into that system and perhaps why it's so popular?
Sure. Gamification are the breadcrumbs that show people what they're supposed to do. If you look at so many games on the App Store, Candy Crush Saga, Pokemon Go, Angry Birds, eventually people are like, okay, they're on a journey, and the points like show progress and also create investment. And what I like about the way our gamification works is as you unlock those badges, the badge that you've unlocked, the top badge, appears next to you when you post on the news feed. And so it's pretty easy when you get to the news feed to see kind of who the top people on the app are. So these are people who have earned so many points by investing in furthering the cause so much. They're the top dogs, and so they get respect from other people in the community. It's called social capital, and it motivates other people to want to unlock those badges, basically just to show that, I really believe in this cause and I'm putting in the work as well. What we really encourage our clients to do is to connect those points to some sort of real life prize. So, for a lot of campaigns, when people reach a certain level, they'll be sent a physical piece of an award in the mail, like a bumper sticker or a t-shirt in their size. And so that connects kind of what they're doing in this virtual, ethereal world with kind of the tangible here and now. And that's really a powerful thing to do.
Right. And I saw one was even Star Wars movie tickets when it came out.
That was a hugely successful thing. They had a couple, extra tickets to be the first to see one of the Star Wars movies. And people did thousands of actions to get that. For the Brexit app, the top 10 supporters got a poster signed by Boris Johnson. And when Brexit surprised everyone and was successful, that became a historical artifact. So people were very, very excited to have earned that.
Interesting. And how do you or the campaign decide the value of these points? Because I'm assuming that more valuable action will award more points. I mean, what tends to be the most valued action that someone can take?
It varies widely. And so part of our induction process for a new client is asking them to line up what their top goals are. What do they want their supporters doing? And those are the actions that we will give more points to. So for some organizations, they're really, really trying to grow their base. And so we give a lot of points to people who recruit their friends. For other people, they're very focused on door knocking. And so, getting people motivated to actually, put on their winter coat and go outside and knock on a stranger's door. They give extra points for that. But it's been a lot of trial and error. And so a lot of these come just in a pre-formatted template where we can know generally that posting something to social media isn't probably as valuable as sending a personalized text message to a friend, for instance.
Right, right. And speaking of social media sharing, that's often a kind of key call to action for campaigns, right? Like share on Facebook, share on Twitter. How does the app facilitate that?
We facilitate it in two ways. The primary way is when people share content from our apps to, say, Facebook or Twitter. Facebook and Twitter interpret that as an organic share. And the way the algorithms are changing, Facebook is devaluing content that's kind of promoted by an organization, but they are giving more value and more preeminence in the newsfeed to things that real human beings are putting on the newsfeed intentionally. And that's the category that we fall into. So it's sort of a reverse way for an organization to get its content out, is to say, no, truly people are taking the time to post this themselves directly to Facebook or Twitter. So that's the first way. And then the second way is to basically give people little chunks of images or videos or GIFs and give them the ability to share that anywhere to almost any app they have on their phone and by phone and email, except for Snapchat. Snapchat is the holdout. It's a closed environment that doesn't allow third-party shares. But I think Snapchat eventually will have to inevitably allow it because at the end of the day, all these organizations want content.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so going back to your first point, it's that, let's say I was to download a picture from the newsfeed, something that the campaign has put out, and then I kind of log in separately to Facebook and share it. That's not going to count towards my action points. So the app kind of facilitates that by having a kind of, a click through or something where you can just share it directly from the app to your social network.
No, you can. Facebook does have such an API, and that's what we use. So we can pre-populate it, and then the person just has to add their personal message. So we make it easy, and we can track it. And so we know that someone actually did share it, and that's how they get their points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was reading a recent article that was talking about your app and using it for the NRA and advocacy and promoting gun rights. And one of the things I thought was interesting is that you've worked directly with Twitter and Facebook to kind of integrate the UCampaign app with Google's Civic Information API. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about your relationship with Twitter and Facebook, kind of how that goes, and then what the Google Civic API is? I haven't heard of that before.
So with Facebook and Twitter, there's nothing really special going on. These are public tools that they offer, and we've just integrated with them. So, no secret handshakes. Same thing goes with the Google Civic API. It's just a great service that Google offers to make it easier for developers like us to make it easy for people to find out first who their elected officials are, because many people don't know, and then make it easy for them to contact them through social, through email, through phone, etc. I love that it's becoming more transparent and universal to have this access. When I started in political activism 10 years ago, there were companies that would charge you thousands of dollars a month to give your supporters the easy ability to email their congressman. And so there was this whole unnecessary superstructure of bureaucracy between people and their elected officials. So it's just an inefficient democratic system. So that's getting better with technology.
Yeah. Super interesting. And another thing I wanted to ask you about is we've been talking a lot about the kind of online actions that someone can take and a little bit about canvassing. But within the app, there's also the kind of promotion of offline events as well, which I think is an interesting connection between a mobile device and then actual offline activism or meeting up with groups. Mm-hmm. How does the app bridge that connection between the online and the offline?
Well, maybe a funny story. Two of our main developers, their background was in dating apps. And so dating apps, of course, are trying to get people to meet up in person. And so we always had this focus on, it's great to get people to do things online. It's even more difficult to do things offline. How do we facilitate that? And so that's where we built in features that kind of allow users in the app to see if there are other supporters in their area. And then because it's a social network, they can simply choose to become friends, to chat with them. And then if they mutually feel comfortable, they'll meet up offline. The NRA members will meet up and they'll go like to a shooting range together, and then they'll go grab a coffee or a beer and they'll talk about whatever they talk about. But then it makes their connection to the app that much more intense, because now that app is like so many other apps, it's connecting them to real friends that they know in real life. And so we do a lot with events, getting people to there with the directions, et cetera.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask you about, is that you could actually, let's say there's a meetup or some type of campaign event, that then you can kind of sync that up with Google Maps, and then it will tell you exactly how to get there from your location.
One of my favorite features we built was for a candidate running for governor in Tennessee, and he is a marathon runner, and he committed to actually run through every county in the state, and I think there was over 400. And he would invite people on the app to come and run a segment of that with him, and then they could use the GPS on the app to track how many miles they had gone with him, and they would get points for those miles, and then they try to donate it to charity. So it was just a really wild concept when they came to us, and I realized that, like so many things, like we already had all the tools off the shelf basically to do that. So fun idea.
Yeah, and that's again one of those things that really only comes with having a smartphone, right? Because it can tag your location. It's not something that really a desktop is useful for.
Yep, exactly. And the other thing you asked about why mobile apps. Well, in so much of the developing world, we've seen that people have kind of skipped desktops and laptops and they've gone straight to smartphones. So again, even more so than in America for our international work, being a smartphone app is a great asset.
Yeah. Technology moving forward. So how would you see the app's role within the overall campaign? I mean, is it kind of a central hub for organizing, or is it an add-on to existing initiatives? Is it more for data collection than anything else? Like, kind of what is the role of the app within the larger apparatus?
Our philosophy is that in any organization that has a grassroots or a supporter contingent, there's the 20-80 rule that says the top 20% of your supporters will do 80% of the total actions. Mm-hmm. So our goal is to get those 20% of people onto a smartphone app where they'll do anywhere between 10 and 15 times more than what they would do if they simply had a website as a tool or were reading your emails. So that's the kind of the core value proposition. And then once you have that top group of people, you ask them to start reaching out to their wider network and start drawing other people in. And that's how it works. So it's not a one-stop shop. I mean, campaigns and organizations, they still need a website. They still need a presence on other social networks. But at the end of the day, you do need that central hub for your top supporters because it's easier for them. Once you've got them in your app, you have information, you have data on them, you have direct access to them for free through push notifications. And so you can activate them very quickly without using a third party.
Right. And those push notifications are super effective, right? Because people tend to check the notifications on their phone way more than, their emails or their Facebook messages, for example.
They run our life like they're not.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the data collection side. So obviously you get users information that they voluntarily give by signing up to the app, but how are campaigns using that? We know about different targeting campaigns and stuff like that on Facebook, but is there something that the data from your app brings that's perhaps different from what someone might collect via an email drive or a Facebook campaign?
It's not too creepy. I mean, all the information that we're basically gathering is self-offered by the user, so we're never secretly scraping their contacts or anything like that. What's really useful for a campaign to see is sort of which actions are most popular. It's an instant test bed where they can just send a message and do a quick survey, for instance, without, again, having to pay a third-party provider. Mm-hmm. And then the other data that we can create for them are lookalike audiences. So once you know kind of what your top supporters look like, we can use the gamification as a determiner of lifetime value. And so campaigns can go out and look in the ecosystem. They can look in Facebook advertising. They can look in voter file and consumer data files and look for people who look not just like their supporters, but their top supporters. Because what campaigns want is not a person who's going to download their app for a day and then uninstall it. What campaigns are looking for is that person who's going to download the app, open it up every day, take all the surveys, do all the actions. That's the kind of person they're looking for. And with so much data available now, we can create accurate models that allow them to find those other people, those diamonds in the rough.
Aha. So the gamification model is actually a way to kind of pinpoint target supporters to build lookalike audiences rather than looking at kind of a voter file that might have incomplete information.
Right. Think about if you ran a company and, like most companies do, you basically had performance reports on all of your employees. You would start to know if you basically companies do this, they gamify their work environment. And so they find out who their most efficient employees are. And then when they go to hire new employees or look for new employees, they know kind of what they're looking for based on their own internal data.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wanted to ask you about the kind of international or transnational aspect, which is, you've worked with a lot of campaigns in the US, but we talked a little bit about the Leave campaign during Brexit. You've also worked with President Danilo Medina's campaign in the Dominican Republic. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the similarities and differences when working with international campaigns or, outside of the US campaigns versus in the US?
It's been a fascinating learning experience. We're in 12 countries now, 4 continents, and everyone does it slightly differently. So I'd say what's helped us is learning from our partners. We don't come in and say, here's how we do things in America, so this is how you should do things in Mauritius, for instance, or Australia. Mm-hmm. And second is just with the experience of knowing how data laws are different in various countries. So we've had to kind of recreate our system. For instance, in Germany, they don't allow any private information to leave the country. So we had to create servers in Germany to host their data. And then in other countries, especially in like Central and South America, it's kind of like the Wild West. And a lot of these countries don't have data laws or data files. And so we're creating sometimes from scratch the first modeling of what their supporters look like from a data-centric point of view. So it's a very wide spectrum, but it's fun. I also love the language component. I grew up, my parents really emphasized languages. So the app is available in 9 languages now. And one of the things that we built was a template that makes it easy for our clients to translate the forward-facing part of the app into a different language within about a couple hours. Mm-hmm. So again, just, the little things that you need to be truly accessible worldwide.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, reading about the case in the Dominican Republic where you had to translate to Spanish, but then you also had to adapt the action points to estrellas or stars because that kind of fit with that campaign, or it had some cultural significance or something along those lines.
That's right. They said points, whatever. We're going for stars. And it was great. Yeah, that's just one example.
Interesting. And now I want to ask you about, because you're working kind of in the political space with getting candidates elected and parties elected, but you're also working with a lot of advocacy groups. And I wanted to ask a little bit about what are the differences between campaigning for a candidate or a party versus a cause and kind of whether it's a grassroots movement or with another organization.
The biggest difference between campaigns and advocacy groups is that campaigns always have an end date and advocacy groups tend to be just going year round. Mm-hmm. And so for a campaign, for instance, one of the things that we would have at the top is a big countdown timer to election day, because that's when it all matters. And that's what everything is pointing towards is, getting the maximum number of people out to vote for your candidate. With an advocacy group, the challenge is that they're trying to get people excited year round to do things. And so the emphasis is a little bit different. We'll focus more on sort of monthly leaders, so people who have done the most actions that month, because there's probably a new hot topic coming out, some contested issue every month or so. And so keeping people engaged year round. And that's where something like the newsfeed is very helpful because what are people coming back for every day? So I'd say that's probably the biggest difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. And leads to my next question, which is about, I guess this is more for political campaigns and advocacy groups, but what happens when the campaign is finished? The campaign's done. Does the app continue so users can keep those interactions, or does it kind of just close down? How does that work?
We try to keep the apps going if possible. We have people who are still using some of our apps from over 3 years ago. Because they met friends and they had an intense experience during a campaign like Brexit, for instance, and they want to stay in touch. Also, we're now in in a world where it's sort of the constant campaign. And so people who do win their elections more and more often, like they don't really shut down their campaign. It just kind of goes into hibernation. And that's what our apps will do. So maybe they're not promoting them, but we'll keep them going. And then when they have to inevitably run for re-election, they've already got some momentum started and people don't have to re-download the app, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. And do they keep their points, or do they have to start back at noob?
We've tried wiping the slate clean, and people don't tend to like that.
Right.
So we tend to keep those points forever in perpetuity.
Gotcha. And my last question has to do with kind of what's next. What kind of initiatives are you working on in terms of design or kind of improving the app from here?
Sure. So we're really focused this year on peer-to-peer texting and peer-to-peer communication in general. We think is the future. So there's several companies in the center left politically who have built really powerful peer-to-peer texting platforms. We just launched ours about 2 months ago. It's called Rumble Up, and it's sort of an add-on to our UCampaign platform. But it basically facilitates individual agents or volunteers having hundreds, if not thousands, of individual conversations with other people and tracking all those conversations and helping facilitate basically a good response. And that's much more personal and intimate than basically getting a robo-dial or TV ad. More and more getting people personally engaged and having a personal contact is seen as a much better method. And so that's what we're working on.
Would you say that you could draw a kind of equivalence between that and like Facebook Messenger, where Facebook had the news feed, and then now it's going more towards having people communicate kind of within the app, but kind of on the margins, peer to peer?
Yes, I would say so. I think at the end of the day, messaging apps are the most important apps on your phone because those are what connect you to other people, not just information. And so political campaigns want to be in that same space, and they want to be equipping their supporters to have human conversations. Because ultimately, yes, the issues matter, but it also matters what your friends and family think. And so getting those influencers and giving them the right tools and scaling that is sort of the next wave, I think, in activism.
Right. Well, Thomas, this has been super interesting. Thanks so much for taking the time out and joining us.
My pleasure.
I've just been speaking with Thomas Peters, founder and CEO of UCampaign. And to find out more about the app, you can go to www.ucampaignapp.com. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Social Media and Politics Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you learned something. Next episode, we're going to look at how chatbots are used to increase civic engagement through Facebook Messenger, so subscribe to make sure you get that directly in your feed. I got to run and get back to some research papers, but as always, it's been a pleasure. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, signing off from Chapel Hill. See you next time.